Hi, I'm Amanda Rowan. I am a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of the Therapist Development Center. This is an audio blog discussing the 5 things I think every social worker should know when they graduate from their MSW program. I had the idea of creating this audio blog after speaking to a MSW who was about to graduate from her program at USC here in Los Angeles, where I live. While I was talking to her, it became clear to me that while she'd gotten really good clinical training in her graduate program, she'd gotten absolutely no training in how to plan for her own career. So one of the things that we aim to do at my company, the Therapist Development Center, is to actually support therapists throughout their careers. And by support, I mean by giving very essential information that's very practical advice. So what I want to do in this audio blog is go through some of the key things that I wish that I had known, and I've learned these things since I've been out in the field for the past almost 10 years now. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is the importance of making a 5-year plan for yourself. So what's the idea behind a 5-year plan? A lot of times when we graduate, what we're mainly concerned with is getting a job. If we want to get a job, we need to get a job, and we may have this idea of ourselves of wanting a very specific job. We want to work with a very specific population. Most people who go to social work school go there with this idea of, I want to work in the schools, or I want to work with the elderly, or I want to work with couples or families or adoption, and that's great. One of the issues that can arise, though, is depending on the job market when you get out, you may not be able to get your ideal job right away. So what's the importance of making a 5-year plan? So if you're in the process of graduating, and whether you've gotten a job or not, it's important for everyone, no matter what career they're in, to actually put some thought into where they want to go. So a 5-year plan would just be an exercise where you take maybe a half hour of your time and sit down and think through, what do you imagine yourself doing in 5 years? Where would you want to be? What kind of agency would you want to be at? What do you think your role would want to be? Do you think you'd want to be a supervisor? Do you think you want to have a private practice? Do you think you might want to be teaching? Do you think you want to be supervising? So think out 5 years from now and put some goals down on paper. And I would say that you'd want to have, at this point in your life, I'd say you'd want to have about 3 to 5 goals for yourself as far as where you want to be in your career. Those goals could include things like getting licensed, becoming a supervisor, getting a promotion, making a certain amount of money. The other thing when you're making your 5-year plan that's very important to consider is your other life goals, your goals outside of your career. I think a mistake that a lot of people make, both in the social work field and in the other professional fields in general, is that they don't think through and think things about like, oh, I want to get married, or I want to have kids, or I want to travel. So these are other things that if you don't factor into a broader plan for yourself, can end up competing against things that you basically kind of set up your wishes and your goals to compete against each other. So let's say somebody has the goal of living abroad, but they don't think about that in terms of how it would fit with their professional life, and so they feel like really reluctant and disheartened and kind of taking jobs, but feeling like their heart really wishes that they were living internationally. If you sit down and take the time to make a 5-year plan, you can factor that in. That could mean that part of your 5-year plan would be working as a social worker in a NGO. That's what they often call nonprofits outside of the U.S., a non-governmental organization. So working at an NGO in South America, or I want to go to England. And a lot of social workers don't realize that England and the UK have a shortage of social workers and will actually hire people out of school to go be a social worker for a couple of years in that country. So there's things like that you want to factor in. Likewise, let's say you want to have children. If you want to have children, it would be important to factor that in. For me, that was an important thing. After I finished graduate school, I got married, and I knew that I wanted to have kids. And I was really glad that in my mind I had this idea that I wanted to be able to work part-time. So when it came to picking jobs, I was very selective in the sense that I picked jobs. I was mainly concerned with a couple things for my jobs. I was mainly concerned with how close they were to home, so I didn't want to make a huge commute. I was also concerned about the flexibility of the time and whether or not part-time was going to be an option. And the last thing that was important to me was that I was going to get my hours towards licensure, because I knew from talking to other social workers that when you first get out of work, one of the key things you can get for yourself as a professional development step is to get your license. And once you have your license, a lot of other doors open up for you. So for me, having this bigger picture and this 5-year plan was really helpful. It allowed me to weigh the pros and cons of jobs and to consider jobs that I wouldn't have considered before if I had been just very narrowly focused on, I want to do this particular kind of work and I'm only going to apply to this kind of job. So that's where I want to start. As far as things you should know is make a 5-year plan. We are going to be developing a free little online course that can help you to create a 5-year plan. It's amazing. Social workers are really good at creating treatment plans for their clients, but they're really bad at creating their own 5-year plan. Really bad at identifying their own goals and then being able to partialize those goals out into smaller steps. Because ideally, once you get your 5-year plan, you can backtrack all the way down to a 1-year plan and see, okay, well, if in 5 years I want this, what do I need to do in the next year to get me towards that 5-year plan? And once you get the 1 year, you can backtrack even down to what do I need to do in the next 6 months? Okay, what do I need to do in the next 3 months? What do I need to do in the next month to be working towards that plan? The last thing I want to note about making a 5-year plan is you probably aren't going to follow exactly that plan. Most of the time, life throws us different opportunities and things that we can't predict. So I'm sure everyone listening to this can think of times in their lives where they had an idea of a certain thing that they were going to do, and then when something else came up, they were like, whoa, I didn't even realize this was an option. So a plan isn't the idea that this is set in stone. It's the only thing you can do. But what the plan does is it actually allows you to see that that you can be working towards something bigger, that you can be motivated by seeing a vision for yourself down the road. Along these lines, every successful company out there has a 5-year plan. And people, when you talk to people in the business world or other people that have had a lot of success, one of the key factors that they all have in common is that they were very clear with what their goals and ambitions were. And there's something about the act of putting it down on paper that really solidifies it. And one of the things that we mentioned in our program on helping people develop these goals is the importance of sharing it with other people and sharing your plans and your goals with your social contacts, especially other social workers in your network. But we'll get to that a little bit later. The next one I want to talk about is this idea that your first job won't be your last job. So this kind of ties into the 5-year plan in that, like I said, people come out of school, they feel a lot of pressure to get a job, and then it feels at the moment like it's a really big decision, like this job, like, okay, I'm picking this job, and there's, I think, a fantasy in people's minds that they aren't aware of, that this is going to be it. I'm going to be at this job forever, and that is not true. I think it is a rare circumstance. I'd be interested if there's even any social worker out there on this planet who has stayed in the exact same job that they got when they first got out of school. So I tell you this because I want to take the pressure off you as far as getting your dream job when you step out out of your university. That what you're going to probably be looking at is you're going to be learning about yourself and about what kind of environments and what kind of work really interests you. There's a really cool book called Stumbling Onto Happiness, and it's by this psychologist who studies how good people are at predicting their own happiness. And it turns out that we're actually not very good at it at all. That people have an idea of what is going to make them happy, but when they actually get into those circumstances, it's rare that the thing that they thought was actually going to make them happy is what makes them happy. So why I tell you this is that one of the things that I've learned in my years as a social worker is that the environment in which I work, the people that I'm working with, make a bigger difference than anything else as far as how happy and satisfied I am with the job. So if I'm working in a job that I really like when I'm the clinical work, but I have a team of people that are just really unsupportive and complaining all the time, and there's office politics that I'm dealing with, or no one's friendly and says hello, going to work can be such a drag, even if the actual work itself is something that you felt like, this is what I really want to do. Where I've had other jobs where initially the clinical work itself wasn't something that I felt like I was particularly interested in, but the team of people were so passionate about what they were doing, and they were so invested in helping their community, both the fellow social workers and the clients, that it just was contagious, and I just got really excited and passionate about what I was doing. When I'm talking about this, I'm thinking in particular, it was my second year internship, and I did an internship working with homeless youth, and it was something that I was kind of peripherally interested in, but the group that I ended up doing my internship was just really fantastic, and I loved what I was doing, and it really made a difference in how I viewed what kind of job I wanted to have. So when you take your first job, know that it's probably not going to be your last job, and also know that besides learning the clinical skills that you're going to get from on-the-job training, you're also going to be learning about yourself and, like I said, what kind of agency, what kind of environment you like to work in, and kind of paying attention to that. Some people are more introverted and they prefer an agency where there's not that much contact between the staff. Other people are like more extroverted and really need to be in an agency where there's a lot of regular meetings and where they're connecting with each other. Different agencies have different cultures. They really do. And so when you go into these different cultures, you pay attention to how the office works. Pay attention to the kind of leadership you see from the upper management, and whether it's supportive or punitive, whether people take into account, the clinical stress of the job, and make sure that the therapists are feeling well supported and well supervised. So what you're going to get from your first job is it's going to be a learning experience. It's going to be a place where you get to hopefully gain some good clinical skills, but also get to know yourself and how you work as a social worker. The next point I want to bring up is your journey of learning has just begun. I'll say that again. Your journey of learning has just begun. And what I mean by this is we go to grad school, we're there for 2 years, we're learning a lot of information. For most people, this is new exposure to this stuff, unless they've had their BSW to start with. But for a lot of people, a lot of these ideas, the different theories, the different program development skills you may get, or administrative information is new information. But, my friends, this is just the tip of the iceberg. What we get in graduate school is minimal compared to the amount of information and education that you're going to get out in the field. And especially if you're somebody who wants to be really good at your job, if you want to be really good, if you want to be a really good social worker, which is what most people go to school wanting to be, it is going to require you to do constant investment into yourself and your own learning. And there are different things out there where you can get online CEUs and online education, but I really want you to be on the lookout for things that you're really passionate about, things that you're really interested in, and in particular, individuals that you feel like, wow, that person really knows their stuff, and I want to learn from them. One of the things that I want to point out with this topic is having to do with that first job. When you're coming out of school, one of the mistakes I think I see a lot of, not a lot, but I've seen social workers make is people who can kind of come off as know-it-alls. So these are people that come to an agency and they're fresh and new, and there's a difference between having an enthusiasm for your job and participating in discussions and talks, and there's a difference between that and people who think they have the answers to everything, or say, I know. Like, let's say you're getting supervision, and people think, I think there's a misconception from some people that they need to act like they know it all. If they don't act like they know it all, it's going to show that they're incompetent in some way, and then it's going to be exposing. So there's definitely a fine balance between saying to like a supervisor, I have no idea what I'm doing, and yeah, can you explain that more to me, because I've never like heard of that concept before, and I really want to be clear that I'm getting this. So in particular, I think for agencies, my experience has been that people that are supervising you like people who show up on time and do their job and have a positive attitude and ask for more cases or more work if there's something that needs to be done, but that are also very open to supervision, that are very open to getting guidance and asking questions and very much trying to learn as much as they can from the supervisor. When I'm supervising people, if I get the sense that the person feels like, oh, I already know this all, like, yeah, I know, I just kind of roll my eyes and think, I got a doozy here, versus somebody who asks really good questions and, is open about, like, I'm not really sure what to do with this case, like, this is what I'm thinking, this is the course I'm kind of going down, I learned this in my internship and I'm trying it out here, but if you have other suggestions. And one of the things I think is always an effective thing to ask a supervisor is, if you were working with this case, what do you think you would do? Like, how would you think about approaching this case? Because then you're going to actually get the supervisor to give you more concrete, hopefully, interventions. And oftentimes what can happen in supervision, at least it's been my experience, is that I got mostly like, oh, you're doing a great job, you're doing a great job, you're doing a great job, unless I specifically asked for interventions or ideas. So if they said, yeah, you're doing a great job, I think you're really working well with the client, say like, oh, that's really nice to hear. I'm curious, if you've had a client like this, what would be your focus, or what kind of interventions have you found to be helpful with this kind of client? And that way hopefully you'll get more directed information. So one of the main sources of learning is a good supervision. Not everybody gets good supervision, but if that, hopefully you will, and hopefully you'll seek that out. The other way of learning and continuing to learn is doing just self-learning with a book, books and articles. And as we get later on, I'm going to talk a little bit about networking. But one of the really effective ways to continue your learning is to form a group, like a book group, that's specifically around, like, let's say you want to learn family therapy, more like structural family therapy, that you could get a couple colleagues and say, hey, do you guys want to order this book from Amazon and read this book and talk through our cases and how we would apply these different concepts? So that's a kind of self-learning. The last thing I want to mention, besides the self-learning and the supervision, is really being on the lookout for postgraduate training institutes that do a specific theoretical orientation. So this is going to be a little bit more money out of your pocket. Maybe not be something that you do right away. But if you are actually thinking that you want to be, say, a clinical therapist who has a private practice, to have a successful private practice, you are the commodity. So you have to be really, really good at your job. And it's just not going to cut it if your only training has been what you got in graduate school. So for me, I was lucky enough in my second year internship to come across the Gestalt therapy. And my supervisor was trained as a Gestalt therapist and was a trainer at an institute. And so he was giving me different articles to read, and I just really loved it. It really aligned with my values. It's very much about supporting client self-determination and working in the here and now. And it also lined up, in my opinion, a lot with attachment theory, which was something that I also really liked. So I ended up signing up for this year-long weekend training that met six weekends a year. I think the cost at the time was about $1,500. So it was a pretty substantial amount of money. But the training that I got from it was phenomenal. And I'm still part of that training group, and now I'm an assistant trainer with the group. And I've gone through it about 10 years, and it has been by far the most supportive and intellectually stimulating environment that I've ever been in. And it was truly a gift. It really is what made me want to become a therapist. Up until that point, I hadn't really wanted to be a therapist. But I'm somebody who really likes to think about theory and talk about theory and get my brain stimulated in that way. That's not something everybody likes to do, But if you're somebody who's hungry for that, if you're somebody who's really hungry for understanding the underlying theory of why people are have like mental health issues and how people get better, I really strongly recommend that you do your research and try to find a learning community that does postgraduate training. So there's a lot of different like psychodynamic institutes. There's different structural family therapy, narrative therapy, Gestalt therapy is my personal favorite. But there's a lot of different institutes. The other kind of things that are out there is if you're interested in things like couples therapy, there's Sue Johnson has emotion focused therapy for couples, and John Gottman, the John Gottman Institute, they do trainings for couples. So if those kind of populations that you're interested in working with, I would recommend really looking in, because it's going to be the best investment you've ever made. When you get out of graduate school and do some of these more focused trainings, they really are focused on fine-tuning your actual clinical skills. The programs that are at graduate school are kind of like going to a cafeteria and getting a bunch of, the different kind of buffet style food. The food is decent. It'll feed you. But if you actually want to have a really good meal, you're going to have to seek out and find something very specific to your tastes. All right, the fourth thing I want to mention is get licensed. So if it hadn't crossed your mind already that you want to get licensed, and this can happen sometimes to people that they think, oh, I want to be an administrator, or I want to do macro level work, or I'm interested in policy and those kind of things. I feel like that's very short-sighted to not get licensed. One of the best things you can have for yourself is that extra job security. And I cannot tell you how many people have contacted me for our test prep program, because we prepare people for the licensing exams, who contact me and say, oh, I've been out of school for 15 years. I didn't think I'd ever want to do clinical work. I got this job and I've been doing it, but now my job is requiring me to be licensed. Or I moved to another state, my life has kind of changed, and I realize I really want to do the licensed stuff. I want to do therapy. One of the best things I ever got told when I was in school was get your license. And that should be, I think, as far as your 2.5 year goal should be out of graduate school, figuring out however you can do it is getting your license as fast as possible. Because once you get your license, you're going to have a lot more opportunities. You need your license to be able to supervise people, which means if you want to get promoted and to run a program, you're going to need your license. When you're applying for jobs, it's happening more and more that the job requirement itself requires you to be licensed. So if you aren't licensed, you are keeping yourself out of a lot of different potential jobs. In California, and I know in a lot of other states, there's a substantial pay difference between being licensed and unlicensed. So at my old job, once I got licensed, my pay went up 20%, which was the equivalent of about $10,000. So the sooner I got that, if I waited a whole year longer than I needed to, I was basically losing $10,000. That's a lot of money. So over the course of your life, once you get licensed, if you add all that income up that you get more of when you get licensed, it's a no-brainer. So I recommend for everybody listening to this, if you're in graduate school still or about to get out of school, go on to whatever state you plan to get licensed or work in, and go on to the board and find out how you get the ball rolling to get your licensure. What's required? How many hours of clinical work? How many hours of supervision? Are there prerequisites as far as courses that you have to make sure you had in graduate school, and if you didn't have them, you need to take them? And also finding out if you have to, some states you have to actually apply to be an intern to be able to start accruing your numbers. So before you can even start earning your hours, you need to send in your fingerprints and send in a picture and send in an application to get an associate's number. So the sooner you get that going, the sooner you'll have it. And there are some states that won't even hire people until they've had that kind of associate's number, or they have that number that's registered with the state. So whenever I talk to anybody who's about to graduate school and they're like, what advice do you have? I always say, get licensed and get your paperwork going right away, because you can go get your little passport photo done, and you can get some of these paperworks all ready to go, so that as soon as your transcript is ready, you can have it sent off to the state and make sure that you're in the system. So getting licensed is essential, and it's only becoming more and more so. A lot of government contracts that fund different agencies are requiring people to be licensed. And if they're not requiring licensure, what happens is that they actually will reimburse at a higher rate for licensure. So that's the motivation of the agency to hire people who are licensed, is because they're going to get paid more for your time if you're licensed. The last topic I want to mention is essential social workers should know when they're graduating from school is that networking is the key to your success. Really, the people that you know and the social work colleagues that you have, both as a support for you in whatever agency you're in, but also for your long-term plan. So going back to that first topic that we talked about, that you need to have a 5-year plan, one of the things that should be included in your 5-year plan as far as a activity, as far as a plan to make it to that 5-year plan, should be building your network. So how do you do this? Well, for those of you that are just graduating school, you have an immediate source of people in your network right now. They're your classmates. They're people that are graduating with you. So one of the things that I recommend for people like you who are still connected with their graduate school program is to get a sheet of paper out and make a list of the 10 people in your class that you most respect. So some of those people you might really like, and some of those people it may be like, oh, I don't really know them very well, but they really make good comments in class and they really know their stuff, and I feel like they are going to be like very ethical. Those people are going to like really make it. I want to mention these people do not need to be in the same field of interest as you. So maybe you're interested in working with kids, but you know Sarah, and Sarah's really into hospice, and gosh, we don't really have anything common because we're in this different track. That doesn't matter. Your network doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter who's in, whether you're in your field or not. It's actually really beneficial to have a diverse network, because in that sense, you guys aren't competing for jobs. So let's say you become really good, have a social contact with a woman in hospice and you work with kids. Well, what if she needs to make a referral for a family whose young kids, they recently lost a dad who was in hospice, and she needs to make a referral to a social worker for services for the kids? Well, she's going to have you in mind. Likewise, let's say you're working with a family and the father is diagnosed with terminal cancer. Well, you have a friend who works in hospice, so you can connect with that person in your network. So make a list of those 10 people. And if you want to, you can share with them this recording of these 5 tips. People find these helpful, I think. And talk about, let's stay connected. So let's create our own little listserv. And if you want to have it more than 10 or less than 10, that's fine. But I think 10 is a pretty good number. And let's stay connected. Let's share with each other our 5-year plans. Let's even put them all in one document and put them down so we can keep each other in mind. And let's stay connected. Let's try to either meet up, once a month initially when we first graduate. Maybe that'll move to, when we get busy with our jobs and stuff, we'll move to just meeting up like once every 6 months. But let's stay connected and send an email if we see trainings or we see job opportunities or different things that we know the other person may be interested in. So that's an easy way and a very comfortable way to start your network off, because it's people you've already been in school with and you're all in the same boat. Once you get going out of school, you're going to want to try to add, I'd say it should be a goal of everybody in social work in that first 2 to 3 years, that you really try to add a person a month, like one contact a month to your social network. And we are going to be creating a networking workshop that you will be able to access to give you more tools around how to do that, because it's amazing to me how bad a lot of social worker and therapists are at marketing. Not marketing, but networking. The two are related for sure, especially if you want to go into private practice. And also, even if you think about marketing yourself for future jobs, networking and marketing go hand in hand. But people are really bad at networking. Oftentimes what people think of networking is, I have a bunch of business cards in my purse, and if I show up somewhere and I give my business card to somebody and I get their business card, like I've networked. And they don't really understand how you engage with somebody, the purpose of that, what the importance of actually just getting to know somebody as a person, So it's fascinating to me, and it's ironic because I feel like as social workers, we know the value of social supports. We really see that with our clients and know with our clients that their social support is a huge index in their overall well-being. And yet we aren't very good at all at building our own social supports and our own social network. And it's one of the things that is fascinating to me is my husband went to business school and I went to social work school. I went to social work school where I learned about how important social contacts were, how important social support was to somebody, but I didn't learn at all about how to get those for myself. My husband went to business school where they learned all about making money and very an individualistic, capitalistic, viewpoint of the world. And they were taught that in school, but what the main thing that they learned, the main tool that they were given during school was networking. It was always networking events. Every week, the program put on some kind of networking event. And even since he's graduated, I would say every quarter, there is an email put out about a networking event for, his business school. This networking event, that networking event. It's all, they push the networking because the business world knows, just like the social work knows for our individual clients, that success comes through networking. Yet, like I said, as far as us social workers, we're not very good at it. So the place to start for all of you listening to this is to make a list of 10 of your most respected peers and colleagues and invite them to be in a networking group. And please don't exclude anyone. If somebody hears about it and wants to be in it, take them. There's no reason ever to exclude somebody from a networking group. So I would just want to make sure to highlight that. I wouldn't want anybody out here to go out and say, oh, we made this list of 10 and so wants to be in it. Sorry, Amanda said just have 10 people. No. Never, ever exclude somebody from your networking group. The more the merrier, but what you really want to get is to try to get a committed group of people, and if you're organizing it yourself, people that you already feel really like you would want to stay in touch with. So that wraps up this audio blog of 5 things every social worker should know when they graduate. We will be transcribing this blog, so you will be able to read it if you'd prefer, but it will also always be available in audio format. And wishing you all the best of luck and congratulations on your graduation.